Friends, greetings from the Rocky Mountain State, one of the most magical places on this planet. Billy and I just landed in Denver. We're driving up to probably one of my most favorite places on this planet, Vail, Colorado. We're about to go through the Continental Divide, otherwise known as the Ike Gauntlet Eisenhower Tunnel. So we're driving a Volvo, so let's do an Ask MotoMan and maybe a quick review of this new-engined old Volvo. And with that, we come out on the other side of the beautiful Continental Divide. I'm going to forewarn you on something here. I am ridiculously biased on this just amazing portion of the world here. So yes, we're going to talk cars. I'm going to answer a couple of your questions, but I may dive off into like Vail Valley trivia and Vail Pass trivia, which we are getting up to the Vail Pass here. Which, you know, maybe we'll do a little trivia right now. Actually, it was named after a man by the name of Charles Vail, and he was part of one of the the Army Forest Rangers that went through here and actually created the pass from Denver in through into Glenwood Springs. Hence, we get the Vail Pass, which we are getting up to now. So technically not Vail Valley, the Vail Pass being a little bit farther east from Vail Valley. Now, let's get into the car we are driving. So this is a 2017 XC60 Volvo. And you're probably wondering, why are we driving a Volvo in Colorado? Well, we're actually going to the world premiere of another Volvo, the Volvo V90 Cross Country Wagon. So, like, stupidly important for Volvo. I am so happy they decided to do this in Vail, Colorado, but I digress. So they decided to fly us into Denver and have us drive these cars up from Denver and then back to Denver, which is about a 2.5 hour drive, depending on the time of year that you're doing the drive. So the logic on their part was they've just changed out the engines in the XC60s as well as the S60s and the V60, so the wagon version. And what they've done is they've mapped the engine to the engines that we've driven in the 90 series cars, both the S and the V90 here. So translated, that means either a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine or a 4-cylinder supercharged and turbocharged engine. Now there is the 4-cylinder turbocharged, which is the T5, not this car. That's 240 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at a relatively low RPM of about 1,600. Really like what Volvo's doing in terms of using these low-pressure turbos to get to boost the torque at a very low RPM to get pulling power, especially useful for high altitude like this. You know, we're about anywhere, depending on how you take the drive, because literally when you go from Denver Airport or just Denver up to Vail, you're literally going straight up the mountain. So you go from 50 to 80, a mile above sea level, to up to, in the case of the back bowls of Vail, like 12,000 feet. So huge elevation changes. So that's where the turbocharger really helps up here. Then there's this one. This is the T6. So this maps to the T6 over on the 90 series. And so this is 302 horsepower in this tune and 295 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at 2,100 RPM. Still low, but a lot more horsepower. And the way they do that is this one has a supercharger in addition to the turbocharger. And we did talk about how this system works in the tech review of the XC90, both the T6 and the T8 from last year. Go back and check out that episode. And we actually kind of go through this in somewhat detail, this whole strategy, because it's more than just putting these engines in these cars. It's a whole different engine strategy in taking 5 engines down to a 2-engine family, effectively. So go and check that out. Anyway, the big question that I had in my mind, especially going up from Denver to here, and really smart of Volvo to kind of put these things in our hands to do this drive, is does it have pulling power? Because this is, well, really a mid-sized crossover, but it's not the lightest thing in the world. So does in this case, 302 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque work at very high elevations. Okay, as we pass through Silverthorne here, which is kind of one of the bigger towns, as you can see, it's not really a big town, but it's one of the bigger towns between Denver and Vail, also home of a lot of outlet malls. We finally get a hill here. Let's put our foot into it, see if this thing actually works. We're actually chasing an older XC60, so it's kind of interesting. And as you can see, it doesn't hesitate. Now, if you were to try this with a naturally aspirated car, not so successful, because this is basically when you get up to high elevation, naturally aspirated cars, they get their energy, basically their output, that completely gets, I don't want to say cut in half, but gets reduced greatly for a couple of reasons. The altitude, and as a result of the altitude, the octanes here are lower as well. So the combination of both affect the output. That's why forced induction actually works better in higher altitude situations, or really applications, because they can get more air into the engine when the engine is really, I don't want to say starving for air, but not getting as much air as it would at sea level. Get it? And just look at some of the vistas here. I mean, here we are, we're on an interstate, and there is a stunning view of a small lake with people out on sailboats in the Rockies. Can you see why I love this place? Now, as we make our way into Frisco, and a stunning vista. It's kind of like Switzerland up here, where you see this and say, oh my God, that is so beautiful. Then you go just like a couple miles down the road and there's something even more beautiful. Anyway, the road, as you can see, this is an interstate, so I don't think it's a really good idea or really prudent of us to spend a lot of time talking about driving dynamics of this, because I have not driven one of these, the XC60s, in other areas, so I don't have a lot of experience with it. So what we'll do is you and I will get this down in California or maybe somewhere else, and we'll do a round-the-block review where I have some more time to play around with driving dynamics. Here, our focus was more about pulling power, and what a great test, going literally straight up a mountain for 2 hours. And magically, like that, we are in one of my most favorite places on this planet, Vail Village. Now, I had no idea this would be here. Obviously, Volvo was completely on top of their product placement. But let's do something different here. Instead of me answering your questions behind the wheel of a car, why don't we go for a walking tour of one of my most favorite places on this planet, and I'll answer some of your questions and show you some cool stuff, so follow me. First off, that's a statue. It's a statue of a ski trooper. So this is very early on days when this was the wild, wild west, like before 62 when this place opened. Like, this commemorates 41 to 46 when the Army was in here clearing out Vail Pass all the way out to Glenwood Springs, which is the other side of the state. Then when you are looking at like a postcard of Vail, you see this, and basically what this is the covered bridge. As you can see, most people are coming through here as couples. I brought Billy, not very romantic obviously, so why don't we go through here quickly, because I do not want to hold Billy's hand, or really your hand, unless you're a hot woman, to go through this bridge here. And you can see, look at this. I mean, if that's not picturesque, I don't know what is. I mean, come on now. Okay, now that we've crossed over the creek into Vail Village proper, just one look at it and you will see it looks very familiar, especially if you've seen our episodes in Germany, because it's designed to look like any ski village in the Bavarian Alps. And keep in mind, this thing was envisioned and designed back in 1962 when the Vail Village was actually founded. Now, I bring up design because our first question is about design, but not about a specific car. It's about how to become a car designer. So we need to unpack this question from Alistair CP. He was on YouTube and I think also on Twitter. And we need to unpack this from a couple of different levels. The schools themselves, and then how do you go about paying for it? Because that's just as important. So let's talk about the schools themselves, because that's the easy answer. There are effectively 4 major transport design programs around the world. There is Art Center, and then there is CCS in Detroit, College for Creative Studies. Those are like the Harvard and Yale in the car design or transport design world. And then there is Pforzheim in Germany, and there's Royal College of Art in England. Now, most of the people, the designers I have featured on this show, have gone to one of those 4 schools. But important point here, not everyone has gone to those schools. Like, for example, Bob Boniface, yes, he went to CCS, but some of the people that work for him went to like university in Ohio, and I forgot exactly which one. But transport design is not necessarily the domain of those 4 schools. So long and short of the story, there are other schools that you can study transport design. They're just not as well known for it. And just as an aside here, speaking of design, this is like one of the things you see on a postcard like that bridge, the clock tower in the middle of Vail Village, and this, as you can see, all cobblestone, is, the Germans would say, a Fußgängerzone, a pedestrian zone. Now let's head back up this way to go to the side of the mountain. Now let's unpack your question from how do you pay for it? Now, you guys know that I'm a cheapskate. You guys know that I'm a Dave Ramsey disciple. But what you don't know is I actually volunteer as part of my alumni group, Arizona State University, for admissions in Southern California. So we do these events to acclimate you to school. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about, and the school hates when I do this, is how to finance school. As you know, I am not a big fan of debt. And that applies not just to cars, but that applies to school, especially to school, because we have a bit of a school debt epidemic in our country right now. So there are a couple ways, Alistair, you can do this if you can't afford to attend, say, Art Center or CCS, which both, if I'm being honest, you're talking like 50 grand a year, so not cheap. While they are the Harvard and Yale in their discipline, they're as much as Harvard and Yale. So the biggest piece of advice I would give you is go to your first 2 years in a place like a community college, a local 4-year school that is maybe state funded so you have lower tuition, and bust your ass there and get the absolute best grades you can, and then go look for scholarship money. You'd be shocked how much scholarship money you can get just by getting good grades in your first 2 years. And if you did well, you told me you were at your A-levels at this point, so if you've done well on your A-levels, you could probably get a good amount of scholarship money into some of these other programs. Now I'm going to take a break here, and I want to show you one thing here. This is the Red Lion Tavern. So the mountain is just over there. Basically, the après-ski thing here in Vail is to come to the Red Lion, and basically you have beer, there's usually a good guy playing a guitar, and everybody has a good time. You meet nice young ladies, maybe in Vail, not so young, but you meet nice ladies. It's a wonderful place to go. Back to your question, Alistair. And this, we need to talk about scholarships. So I told you that I'm involved with Arizona State University in admissions. Well, as part of that group, we have a local scholarship. It's not a lot of money, it's a couple of $1,000s, but the thing that I found in the past 10 years in offering the scholarship, you would be shocked how few people apply for it. So the competition is so minimal and the chances of getting it are so high. And what I found out was not every scholarship is competitive. So you'd be shocked how you could go and stack or ladder these scholarships if you bust your ass and you look for different scholarships from local alumni groups, maybe people who have a car club that have a scholarship. There are so many of them out there. Granted, are they $30,000 and $40,000 a pop that will pay for the entire tuition for the year? No. But if you want to be a car designer, you're going to have to work to do it. So you could go out there, and I know of a number of students that have applied to 30, 50, 70, even one I know applied to 100 scholarships and got a full ride all the way through 4 years of school. And even on this show, we had an intern like 2 or 3 years ago, Jim Volak. This kid went to film school at Temple. He did the thing where he went to a local community college for the first 2 years, paid it in cash, and then saved up a lot of money from working 3 jobs while he was in university, and then he paid for his schooling through Temple. Not cheap, we're talking 30, 40 grand a year, and yes, he took a little bit of debt, but it was less than 10 grand, and he paid it off in less than a year after graduating. I am like stupidly proud of Jim Volak. I mean, stupidly proud, and now he works for like the NFL in the film world. This is what it takes to be successful. Now, one last point for Alistair. At the end of the day, there is no law out there that says you need to go to one of these 4 top schools around the country to become a car designer. There is no law out there that says that you need a transport design degree to become a car designer. Yes, it is significantly more helpful, and like going to Harvard for an MBA or Stanford for an MBA, you get a lot of networking bang for your buck when you go to a place like Art Center or CCS, because most of these guys are running design at all these car companies around the world. But you have met a number of car designers that have been on the show that didn't get transport design degrees. Like the guy who runs design for Land Rover, he has an industrial design degree. Or Brian Smith at General Motors, who works for Bob Boniface and has done a lot of work at Cadillac, now on SUVs. He didn't go to any of these 4 schools. He went to some school in Ohio or something like that. So at the end of the day, you need to figure out a way to pay for it without going to debt. Number 2, figure out a way to get as much scholarship money as possible, especially for you, because from what I understand, you live in the Middle East, so it's gonna cost you more to get to one of these schools if you really, really wanna go to those schools. And then last but not least, it's not about the school you go to, it's about the hustle you have. And that's just the bottom line. Okay, now let's dive back into cars, but before we do, another bit about Vail Village here. So this is one of the quad lifts, one of the high-speed quad lifts. This goes right into Vail Village, and then over there is Lions Head Village, and there they have a fully enclosed gondola, high speed as well, actually much faster than this. And I can't believe this, but they put that in like 10, 15 years ago. I've been coming here a long time. Anyway, let's take on John Asu's question. John Asu, John, my apologies if I have butchered your last name. John has a Volvo question. And his question, it is, should he go with a Volvo XC90 T6 or a Volvo XC90 T8? And really, to answer this question, we need to unpack 2 levels of it. The first level is, does it make financial sense, at least in your case, to get a hybrid, which effectively is what that is. And then really, and this is I think the more important part of it, why do you really want either the T6 or the T8? So let's unpack the easy one first, where I have math to back this up. So instead of Volvo, let's use a Toyota Prius as an example, because this is an example most people would know. A Toyota Prius is equivalent in size to like a Corolla, a Cruze, and there is about a $5,000 difference in price between a car like the Cruze, a C-segment car, and a Prius. So the question, as it applies to the Prius, are you going to save enough money in fuel economy, meaning less fuel you put in the tank of that car, to make up the $5,000 price to buy the vehicle, to buy into it? And in order to do that, you need to drive 40,000 miles a year for over 4.5 years just to break even. And then at that point, you start making your $5,000 back. So short of taxi cab drivers in cities like New York, I don't know anybody that is going to make financial sense with buying a Prius. Now, let's apply it to the Volvo, because the delta is even bigger, because it's not just the propulsion system you're paying for. You're paying for the propulsion system, you're paying for a propulsion system that will run 100% on EV, and it's just a fancier model. It's got like the Aurifers crystal shift knob, which is stunning. Speaking of stunning, we're looking over the Vail Valley here. And I'm starting to lose my breath because we're high above sea level, people. I didn't do my run today. Anyway, the difference is different when it comes to, and I said the difference is different, isn't that funny? The difference is greater in the Volvo because you're getting more. But I would be hard pressed to see somebody driving a Volvo more than 40,000 miles a year, which the difference would have to be more to make up for that delta. So I'm going to turn the question around to you, and you really have to ask yourself, what is it you really want by getting the XC90? Do you want an efficient but nice driving and very cool looking luxury SUV? Then do the T6. If you want something you can keep up with like a BMW V8, then get the T8. Because that thing, it's not just tuned for fuel efficiency, it really is tuned for you can drive it around town, what, 20, 25 miles, or you can go really fast, because when you put it in sport mode and put your foot into it, that thing goes. So really, the question you have to answer yourself as it applies to your situation. Okay, those are the only questions I'm going to take today. We'll come back next week with another Ask MotoMan. But now I want to turn the question around to you, and I want all of us to help Alistair here, because I think he's going places. He reached out to me like 4 or 5 times about this one topic. Something tells me he's really into it. So my question is, I want you guys, those of you that put yourself through university or somehow went through university without a lot of school debt, I want you to share your story for Alistair to read here and see how you did it. I only gave you 3 examples. I guarantee you there are 300 examples we can get from you guys. So I want you to share your story, specifically how did you pay for school and not get into a lot of debt. And you know what? Let me know what the degree is, and if you are using it today, let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with 2 things. Number 1, make sure you download our fancy new mobile application. But as part of that, did you know that we are live on 5 international airlines? Emirates, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin America, Virgin Australia, and soon this fall, American Airlines. And with that, I want to leave you with a fun fact about my magical Vail. Billy, come on in here. I want to show the people something. So we are overlooking Vail Village. It's getting dark here because obviously I rambled on a bit here. I should have taken an earlier flight. So we're overlooking Vail Village here. And if you look here, look at the beautiful trees and how green it is over here. But notice on the other side of Interstate 70, it's like brown. There's really not that many trees. And notice they didn't take the trees out there like they did here to create ski runs. That's just natural. The reason why is the way the sun goes through the valley here. It goes from east to west. That is north and that is south. So the sun is always beating on that side of the valley. So that one, you could, like in the middle of winter, you barely see any snow over there. Where here, it could be like 4 feet of snow. So there you go, a fun fact about Vail.